Hello, and this is a short video to summarize the main points of the Sarah Song essay that you're going to be reading this week for the discussion. And the name of the essay is What Does It Mean to Be an American? Keep in mind that this is a summary and it doesn't hit all of the points. And so make sure that you read the essay and bring in specific points from the essay in your discussion post for the week. So let's go ahead and get started. So the essay does two major things. The first thing it does is it talks about what civic solidarity is and why civic solidarity is important for a democratic society. And then it moves on, and the essay describes three models that can build civic solidarity. And in other words, sort of answers the question of, well, what does it mean to be an American, particularly since civic solidarity is an important feature of American democracy. And so let's take a look first at what civic solidarity is and why Sarah Song thinks it's important for democracy. Then we'll look at the three models. So what is civic solidarity? Well, to understand that term, let's break it apart and first talk about what we mean by solidarity and next what we mean by civic. So when we think about the concept of solidarity, solidarity often refers to being unified, being united, having unity within a group. And in other words, that people who are in a group are unified or brought together by a common interest, okay? And so, as you know from, my self-introduction, that I am a big Brewers fan. And so maybe not this year, although they do seem like they have a good sense of solidarity, but it's been a little bit of a disappointing year. But, one of the things that, that I think has made the Brewers work in the past, or quite frankly, any sports team for that matter, is that sports teams work when they have a strong sense of solidarity, when they see themselves as all a part of the same team, and that they all are united by a common interest, that is to win games, and that they work together and support each other to achieve that goal. Sports teams are just one type of solidarity. Solidarity, you can have good families have family solidarity, that you all are a part of a family, and that goal is to support each other and to do what's best for your family, whether that's duty and obligations or other sort of endeavors that support the family, and that you've got each other's backs, right? Like I have a brother and a sister, and we might fight and disagree, but at the end of the day, we know we're family. Blood is thicker than water, and we've always got each other's backs. That's an example of solidarity, and there are many other. But we're not just talking about general solidarity, we're talking about civic solidarity, okay? And so the word civic is derived from the Latin term civis, and that means citizen. And so when we're talking about civic solidarity, we're talking specifically about unity within the body politic. Unity within a political community, okay? And so whether or not that political community is your city, your state, your nation, your country, when we're talking about civic solidarity, we're talking about that individuals see themselves as united through a common interest in terms of what it means to be a member of that political community. So as it says there, that civic solidarity is the sense that we see each other as united into one political community. And in other words, for this essay, that civic solidarity means that we see everybody in this country as Americans, and that we are united by the values that bring this political community together. And that while we might belong to one political party or another, or live in a rural area or in a city, at the end of the day, that when you have strong civic solidarity, it means that as an American, you've got other Americans' backs, okay? And so that's what's meant just sort of writ large in terms of civic solidarity, unity within the political community. So civic solidarity, we have a general understanding of what that word means, but civic solidarity plays a really important role in Sarah Song's essay. For her, civic solidarity is a very important component of a democratic society. That you really cannot have a democratic society if you don't have civic solidarity. So let's look at some of the reasons that she offers for why this is the case. So the first point that Sarah Song makes is that we need civic solidarity because it supports the values that are essential to a democratic society. And in the lectures this week, we talked about what some of the values are for a democratic society. So we know that in a democratic society that we have certain rights and that those rights need to be respected. And so, that in a democracy, you have to be willing to listen to people that you disagree with. You have to treat them with respect. You have to realize that they have just as much of a right to engage in the political process and to promote ideas as you do, right? And that it's easier to do that when you feel like the person you disagree with or that you don't want to listen to, it's easier to give them that respect when you feel like you're in solidarity with them, when you see them as an American that deserves just as many rights that you have, that they deserve those rights as well. Because if you don't listen and respect each other, then we're really not in a democracy, right? Because democracy is about the competition of ideas and the competition of political parties and the competition of political policies, and that hopefully that what the majority wants gets reflected in that. Well, everybody should have a fair shot in making the case for why their viewpoint is a good viewpoint. And that leads into pluralism, right? Democracy is about recognizing that different interests have the right to compete, that some interests will win out over other interests, and it may not be your party that wins, but that you recognize that we're all in this together, and sometimes other parties will win in the marketplace of ideas and candidates, and you've got to give them the respect that they've earned by, winning an election and going on to govern. And so it's easier to do that when you feel like you're united together as Americans. Mutual toleration, it's kind of the same thing, that, that we have these partisan and ideological rivals, but that we have these deep differences. But at the end of the day, that we all love our country, and that because we are united as Americans. And so, democracy is hard work. It's hard to do the necessary tasks to make a functioning democracy, and it's easier when you feel united together as a political community. The second reason that Song thinks that civic solidarity is important is because it is necessary to the pursuit of redistributive justice, and she views that as a key component of democracy. So she defines redistributive justice as the fair allocation of resources among diverse members of a community. And so in a democracy, we live in particularly in the United States, we live in we live in in a diverse body politic, and that in that body politic that we have resources and that we need to distribute those resources in a fair and just way. And that in a democracy, the value is that the resources get distributed in a way that's supposed to care for those that are most vulnerable. So the ill, those who cannot take care of themselves, the elderly, right? An important aspect of democracy is that, it's a government of, for, and by the people, and we need to make sure that the safety and the security of people are met. And so we come together as a community to make sure that people are taken care of. And also we recognize that there are inequalities of life chance, that we don't choose who our parents are. We don't choose whether we're born into a rich family or a poor family. That we also know that there are certain realities regarding race and gender within our country. And so we recognize those, and that we use resources to offset things that are beyond our control, whether we're born poor, rich, white, black, male, female, and that we make sure that we take care of the most vulnerable. And so you need civic solidarity for redistributive justice because it allows us to see those who need help as like me, because we're all Americans. We're all a part of that political community, right? So civic solidarity binds us together. We don't see each other as in your tribe or in the other tribe, and I hate the other tribe. To quote President Obama, it's not blue America, it's not red America, it's the United States of America. And civic solidarity can provide that bonding that's needed in order to make sure that we take care of the people that live in our society. And the third point that Sarah Song makes about why civic solidarity is important is she says it's better than other ways that we could unify a body politic. There are lots of ways of unifying a body politic. You can unify a political community around race, that you could say, you are American because you share this particular race or this religious identity or this ethnicity. You can develop unity around that. But she sees that as being more of an exclusionary type of solidarity, and that one that doesn't really work best for democracies. It may create unity, but that kind of exclusionary solidarity doesn't work best in a democracy. So it's better to have a unity that revolves around and draws people together according to shared principles, right? Rather than drawing solidarity around race, ethnicity, or religion. Okay, so we've defined civic solidarity and we know why it's important for a democracy, why it matters. The next thing she does in her essay is she says that we need to find the best model for creating civic society so that we can support democratic society. And she says that we need to find a model that's thick enough to provide unity necessary for redistributive justice and democratic principles. So you need one that that binds us together with a strong enough fabric so that we have this civic solidarity. But we also need a model that's thin enough to, allow for diversity within our community, right? That is thin enough to allow for racial, ethnic, and religious diversity. So let's take a look at the three models that she presents. Okay, so Song offers three models for building civic solidarity: the Habermas model of constitutional patriotism, the David Miller model of liberal nationalism, and the Charles Taylor deep diversity model. Let's dig in and look at each of these individually. Okay, so let's look at Habermas's constitutional patriotism model. From his perspective, that what he says is that what we need to bind us together, what creates civic solidarity, it's not race, it's not religion, it's not ethnicity. What binds us together is an allegiance to shared political ideals and values, right? And so that to be an American and to create civic solidarity, that you have to know what those ideals and values are, and that you need to understand them and you need to embrace them, okay? And that, we find, for this week, or actually for next week, when we look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and then, the Bill of Rights and subsequent weeks, it's like that's where we find the values, right? And that's where we build that civic solidarity. And so we build civic solidarity because we embrace the idea of that all people are created equal, right? And they're treated equally in the eyes of the law. That we embrace the idea of democracy, that what the people want is what should be reflected in government, and that we have free and fair elections to sort of determine that we're endowed with certain inalienable rights, those natural rights, the rule of law matters, that no one's above or beyond the law, that there's limits placed on government, et cetera, et cetera. So for Habermas, it's like, how do you build civic solidarity? Well, you teach people what these values are, and then you say, if you're an American, then you got to live these values, okay? And for Habermas, that's it. You don't need to share a common language, or you don't need to have a shared ethnicity or a shared race. You just need shared political values. He says that's enough to create civic solidarity. All right, this brings us to the second model, which is David Miller's liberal nationalism. For David Miller, that thinks the Habermas's model just isn't strong enough. It doesn't create a thick enough fabric to hold us together in terms of civic solidarity. And so he's basically saying that to create good and strong civic solidarity, creed alone isn't enough. You need more than just these are the American values, embrace them. He says that you need to embrace the values, the American creed as identified in the founding documents, but you also have to embrace the culture of the United States as well. And so from his perspective, what he says is that what it means to be an American is obviously to embrace the creed, but you also must assimilate to our Anglo-Protestant culture that has been here for 200 plus years. In other words, that you embrace the creed, but you also recognize that we are historically a deeply religious nation. That's a true statement, even though more people are identifying as non-religious. I mean, we still have like a very high percentage of people who identify as religious as compared to European countries, and so that's a product of our culture. And so you recognize that religion is important, and not only that, but there's a plurality in religion, right? That generally Protestant based, but also Catholic, Judaism, Muslim, and that you recognize that there's not just one religion, that we're religious, but part of why religion has really thrived in the United States is because the state's not telling you what to believe. You get to choose what you believe, and the different religious groups are given respect. Also, that the culture is a work ethic, right? Sort of a Protestant work ethic, that you don't look for handouts, that you're not, sitting on your butt, you're not blaming others, but that you get up in the morning, you work hard, that you have a personal obligation to do that. And that, you also have to, that there's a strong sense of individualism as well from David Miller's perspective. It's a part of our culture, right? That you are responsible for yourself, and that you try to make the best with what you're given. And then finally, that there are, a cultural heritage in the United States that should be valued, like sort of, knowing that background and respecting English. So, that's why it's sort of liberal nationalism. He's saying that liberal, and that you embrace these liberal values that come from our founding documents of equality, that everyone's born with certain inalienable rights, but we mix into that liberalism, this respect for this long-lasting culture that we have in the United States. For David Miller, that's what creates a strong civic solidarity. And then the final model that Sarah Song talks about is Charles Taylor's deep diversity. Basically says that the other two perspectives, the Habermas perspective and the Miller perspective, deal with first level diversity. That we have differences, but all those differences are submerged under the creed. And it's almost like the differences and the diversity within the United States is not recognized or fully or appropriately recognized by the other two models. And so for Charles Taylor, he says that what truly binds people together is, yes, the creed, but also a recognition that what it means to be an American is really different for different groups of people within America. That the Anglo-American experience of what it means to be an American is very different from those who are African American, who were brought to this country against their will and were bonded in slavery for since 1619. Asian Americans and forced labor that they had as with the expansion west. And the persistent, sort of inequalities that exist as they revolve around different groups, right? And so for Taylor, it's just sort of like that what it means to bond together is that we share a creed, but that we also have to recognize that we have very different and distinctive ways of belonging to America. And that solidarity develops by not just glossing over those differences to say that this is what binds us together as Americans, these values, but we recognize that not everybody's experience of what it means to be an American is the same, and to truly recognize those differences. And it's in recognizing and respecting those differences that we can create a strong fabric of civic solidarity. Next week, we're going to be watching a short video where Frederick Douglass, descendants of Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist who was born into slavery but then got his freedom, that he wrote an essay called "What to a Slave is the 4th of July," and basically kind of capturing this deep diversity that for many the 4th of July means something, but for African Americans, and he wrote it while slavery was still the law of the land, 4th of July doesn't mean a lot for a slave. And so when you watch that next week, keep that in mind, because I think it's a good example of this deep diversity model that Charles Taylor is talking about. Okay, so that's it for the brief overview of the essay. Make sure you do read the essay, but hopefully the summary will help you. It'll make it easier for you as you're working your way through the essay. And then you'll use this essay and other components to engage in the discussion this week of what does it mean to be an American. Thanks a lot for listening, and I appreciate your time, and I'll talk to you again soon.